Hello and welcome to the webinar, which is titled Education in the Times of COVID, Issues and Challenges. While we wait for participants to join, I think we should get started. We are also on Facebook Live, and I'm sure there will be a lot of followers there. My name is Sandeep Sharma. I'm the founder of India Donates, and it is my pleasure to welcome each one of you on this day, which is being celebrated as International Day of Education, which is actually on 24th, but being celebrated worldwide on 25th January. And the theme of this year's day is Recover and Revitalize Education for the COVID-19 generation. So that is what the theme is, and that's what speaks about the issue that we have in our hand. Challenging times for all of us. I am joined by extremely esteemed panelists, 4 of them. I would introduce each one of them a little later, but let me begin by briefly outlining the program, how it would work out. We have 4 speakers for the day. Each speaker would speak for about 10 minutes. Then there will be a direct question and answer round for about 5 minutes. And this goes on till the 4th speaker speaks. At the end of it, we have about half an hour for question and answer session, depending upon the questions that we get on the floor. Before I hand over to the panelists and introduce them, let me just briefly map out the kind of issues that we are dealing with right now. The COVID pandemic has exacerbated the divide between the have and the have-nots quite distinctly. And the pandemic has had its effect on all walks of life. And education was not an exception. In fact, education was one area which has got primarily hit because of the kind of situation that we are dealing in worldwide. There were lockdowns. Still, we are in the midst of COVID pandemic, even though there is good news about vaccine being arrived and people being vaccinated. But still, schools are largely closed. Some colleges have opened, but still the education sector as such has been heavily impacted. And that is why we thought, how do we sail through these challenging times, and how do we foresee what the future is going to be, how it is going to map up. And in that context, we organized this webinar, which we call Towards an Inclusive Education Environment Post-COVID. Now, when will COVID go? That is yet to be seen, but already looking at the situation that we have. So these are the kind of issues that we have in our hand, and I'm sure because of the esteemed panelists that we have today, we are going to have a very enriching discussion. So let me introduce panelists one by one. The first one to introduce is Ms. Mamta Saikia. She is the Chief Executive Officer of Bharti Foundation. Bharti Foundation is doing path-breaking work in terms of education. As the CEO, she has led the development of organizations' education program at primary, elementary, and senior secondary schools. Under her leadership, the flagship initiative of the foundation, Satya Bharati School Program, provides free quality education to around 40,000 children from marginalized communities in rural areas through its 183 schools across 6 Indian states. Mamta was honored in 2019 as influencer leader by AACSB International. She was also among the 100 Women Achievers of India in 2015-16. And she has also been conferred with Karamveer Puraskar, which is National Citizen Award for Social Justice and Action. So welcome, Mamta. We are really hopeful that your presence today and the deliberation that you're going to bring forward would immensely help the participants. We are also on Facebook Live, as I said, so larger audience are going to listen to what we have to say. Then we have with us Dr. Rahul Singh, who is a professor of strategy and globalization at BIMTech, Birla Institute of Management Technology, a renowned management institute. He's also the chair of strategy, innovation, and sustainability at Birla Institute, founding chair of the executive education program. His primary areas of research is in strategic management, globalization, emerging market, and sustainability. Professor Rahul is published in multiple top-tier journals and have worked in various research projects with CAI, European Union, British Council in USA, to name a few. Welcome, Dr. Rahul. Then I have a very old friend of mine, Dr. Aishwarya Mahajan. He's the Director of Livelihood Education at EdTech International. He's a doctorate in sociology and has around 20 years of experience in encompassing new program development, assessment, and behavior strategies. soft skills and personal development training, resource management, and client servicing. He's an expert in liaising with stakeholders like UN organizations, international development organizations, trust foundations, CSR foundations, and government in developing work programs, designing courses and curriculum in sustainability. I'm sure with Dr. Mahajan's presence here, we are going to get a global overview in terms of how the education was during these COVID times and how it is going to map in the future. So welcome, Dr. Mahajan. Then we have, we are very excited to have with us Mr. Kaustav Khare. Mr. Kaustav is a AVP product at Byju's. Byju's is one of the fastest growing edutech company in India. He has led product initiatives in the K-12 domain for the last 3 years at Byju's. Kaustav comes with 11 years of experience in building customer experience with stint in video and live TV, news and content distribution. He also represented India at 2 Asian championships for kayaking and canoeing and holds 2 silvers and 1 bronze for the country. So welcome, Kaustav. We are very happy to have you with us. This is the esteemed panelist that we have with us today. So to begin with, I would like to invite Mamta and talk to us about the kind of issues that you face during these COVID times. While in the urban areas, the perception at least is, through the use of technology, to a large extent, one could, impart education. How about rural areas? And I understand that Bharti Foundation also, has, it works in different parts of India, also in far-flung rural areas. So what did Bharti Foundation do? So we wanted something real, something practical that has happened on the ground. And who better than Mamta to speak on this topic? Over to you, Mamta.
Thank you, Sandeep. Thank you so much. Very good afternoon to everybody. I do have a presentation, but the purpose of that presentation was to, like Sandeep said, bring the reality, to all of you. And I do want to talk about Bharti Foundation's experience because we have 183 schools in the villages. We work with underprivileged children. So the issues of digital divide stared at us. All of our teachers also come from the host village or neighboring villages around our schools. So we, so all the, one may say, the teachers' readiness, right? The kind of teachers that we had, we also dealt with this entire aspect of how to get our teachers ready. Last 10 months, because it all started from May 3rd week, last 10 months have been, for me, a very inspiring journey because, like I said in one of my letters to my employees, that when going gets tough, the tough get going. I think, and it is not true only of Bharti Foundation. I have heard so many stories among government teachers. I have seen the amazing, we somehow sometimes find it very easy to criticize teachers. We find it very easy to criticize what's happening in the government system. But being on the ground, I have experienced what magic teachers and people on the field have created. So what I'm going to do is, I understand, Sandeep, I have got 8 minutes. Am I correct?
You've got about 10 minutes.
Okay, I've spoken for 1 minute, so I'll take it as 9 minutes. So what I'll do is, I'll spend first 4 or 5 minutes telling you about Satya Bharti schools and what we experience, because setting the context is very important. And then I'll kind of reflect upon what I have seen and sitting in the villages. I've started visiting schools as well, Sandeep. Although schools aren't the same as they used to be with children, but I'm visiting schools, I'm meeting teachers, I'm looking at what's happening in the villages. So I'll also share my reflections on, how I see things unfolding in future. So what you see on the screen are our 2 schools. What you see on top is our junior school. These schools are primary and elementary. Of course, there are more rooms. We've only captured 1 wing of it. These are Satya Bharti schools. The land has been donated to us by the community, and we built these schools. These are owned by Bharti Foundation. So we fully fund them, be it teachers, be it everything is free for the children, because you see over 75% children come from SC, ST categories. All of them are poor children. So we make sure that a child just has to walk in, be it uniform, notebooks, textbooks, pencils, crayons, anything that a child needs is provided by us. What you see at the bottom are our senior secondary schools. We've got 5 CBSE schools in the villages, right? And CBSE does not differentiate between when they give their question papers for board exams. CBSE doesn't differentiate, are you a rural school with underprivileged children, or are you one of the most privileged schools in Delhi? So these are senior secondary English medium schools in the villages. We currently have around 1,100 children in each of these schools. These are really large schools, it takes it takes an entire team to run these schools. Next slide, please. So these are all schools in villages, and we only our schools are open to underprivileged children. We have over 50% girl child, so we make sure that there is no girl. Of course, there are people who apply to our schools, especially in senior secondary schools. We have less seats than children that we can take. We make sure that there is a fair representation of girl child in our schools. I'll skip this slide. I've talked about it already. Sandeep has also mentioned we have 40,000 children, 50% girls, over 75% belonging to SC/ST. What we've started doing around 5 years back is we've taken our learnings from Satya Bharti schools, some of the good practices, and we've started working with government schools now. So when COVID hit, so on one hand, we were working with our Satya Bharti schools, and on the other hand, we were working with government schools. And that's why I said, Sandeep, that there are so many inspiring stories that I have to share, even from the government schools. Next slide, please. So, okay, so we're in over 800 government schools, but more than that, we're now working at a block and district level where we share some good practices for all the schools at the block level or a district level where we are working. So our reach is now much more than what these numbers reflect. Next slide, please. So COVID happened in March. March 3rd week, I think schools were closed down. All the educationists know that that was the time in most of the states, final exams were going on in all the schools. And the textbooks for next year were not yet given to children. So when students and teachers went into lockdown, they went into lockdown without the textbooks of a new year. Not many people talk about it, but that was a big challenge in front of all the educationists, because the next academic year was to start in April. How do you keep children learning? The second thing was, one good practice in Satya Bharti schools has been our very strong parent-teacher meetings. And I think we were very, very fortunate. Around 2 years back, we had started a process called Phone PTM, where all the parents who used to have smartphones, we used to call them and download some free apps, or give them some very good links to YouTube. So our training and curriculum, our academic cell would curate very good free content on YouTube and apps. So every 2 months, we'll call the parents, download new YouTube videos, give them links to new apps. I think we were very fortunate. We were kind of getting ready for this phase, I think. So when COVID hit, 75% of our parents already had a smartphone. So, over 2 years, parents saw whenever they had to buy a new phone, they would buy a smartphone because they knew that, oh, now we can participate in Phone PTM. So we were among a very fortunate group of schools. 75% of it, not only children had access to a smartphone, but most of the parents were already trained on how to download apps. Most of the parents already had, some of the apps and YouTube links on their phone to, The second process, again, we had started around 2 years back, was something called home mentoring. So our parents are not necessarily literate given their background. And our children come from families where they can't afford a tuition master coming at home, right? So whatever support that they have to get at home, they have to either get it from their parents, their chacha, their taya, their uncle, their elder sibling. So we had started a process called home mentoring, where we asked the parents either to identify somebody in the family who studied a little, could be elder brother or sister who would mentor the child, or we had started training parents on some very basic things, that how do you balance the play time and study time? How do you look at what is the assignment given, you know? So for last 2 years, we were also training our parents on home mentoring. I think we were very fortunate because as we moved into this phase, these two processes made it very easy for us to start teaching children at home. So what you see is, our teachers kept on, they moved out of the school with teaching learning material kits, which are kept in the school. So they took the chart papers, the sketch pens, because at that stage, we didn't know for how many days school would be closed. And the New Year's teaching learning material, all teachers knew that in April, New Year is starting, and they had to make teaching learning material for the new academic year. Most of the teachers took that material home, and we had already, previous slide only, we had already prepared the holiday homework, holiday activities for our schools. So immediately, the holiday homework went to all the parents. Our teachers we immediately trained them on how to hold Zoom calls. So they started taking calls with parents to tell them what is to be done. Within 48 hours, they formed class-based WhatsApp groups. We knew that 25% children are not in these WhatsApp groups, but complete credit to our teachers. So if reading is going on, a parent would take a video of the child reading, send it to the teacher. Teacher would call back the parent that where the child pronounced things wrong, or could not pronounce a word. This was some effort that our teachers did. And then I think something very magical happened. Our teachers, for the remaining 25% children, they started taking voice call based group calls, so you can't have more than 3 to 4 children. Imagine this. They would read out something to the children, give them the assignment for home, and after 2-3 days, call up each child individually to hear their assignment, that what the child has written, and then guide the child further. Most of the teachers, over this period, I've spoken to so many teachers, and they said, Madam, our third shift starts after 8 p.m. when parents come back home. Because when the lockdown got over, parents started going out for work. Now, if they're coming back at 7:30, now the child has access to WhatsApp, and the child is, and parents start calling them with, some questions they have and things like that. And I know that similar work has been done across the country, even by government teachers. So what you're seeing over here are our teachers making TLM. They self-taught themselves how to make videos. They got very excited about it. They started making their videos, teaching children as if they're teaching a class. And these videos started going to students, and they were so excited to see their ma'am, teaching them. So amazing, amazing work happened. Our schools are running their regular curriculum as we speak. Of course, we are a little behind on speed. Our academic cell has picked up some very critical critical aspects that have to be taught for each class. But I'm very, very happy that all our children are studying. Our teachers have now started going to the homes of some of those children who do not have a WhatsApp phone even today. I think from 75%, we've moved above 80% now. More parents have acquired. So they are now doing home visits. They do quick classes at home, maintaining distance. Now come to next slides. It's all over. I'll just show you photographs. I've told you the story. So what you're seeing over there is, I think, a Zoom class. Parents attend the Zoom class along with their children, because they know that finally, after the Zoom class is over, they will have to teach their children. So I think somewhere parents are getting educated. None of our extracurricular activities have stopped. None. So we celebrated Girls' Child's Day, Girl Children's Day on this Saturday. Amazing work created by students. They wrote essays, they wrote poems, and each year our children go to the Sarpanch, and they make the Sarpanch and entire Panchayat take a pledge that no girl child would be out of school in their village. You know what they did? They did a group call with the Sarpanch. So I have photographs of, over a video call, Sarpanch taking the same oath again. And I'm so inspired by what children and teachers have done on the ground. Yes, we can't do as much we were doing in regular days, but nothing has stopped. So you're seeing some of the drawings. So there are these competitions where our children send their posters and drawings. You're seeing all of that. I think on bottom right-hand side, you're seeing a teacher taking a class over phone. So she's put some TLM on the wall and she's teaching children. Next slide, please. These are all photos. I'm sure now these photos make sense. When book distribution started, my God, this was a science because we had 40,000 children. Imagine 40,000 transactions when parents had to come, and we actually had to do 80,000 transactions because in the second round, we distributed notebooks and pencil and stuff for home for our children because we kept that. Everything was sanitized. Our process was a no contact process. So you can see book sets were kept on the table. One parent was called in at a time. So like a doctor, we gave appointments. Parents came, picked up the set according to their class and dropped a signature slip in the box. Completely no contact exercise. Imagine 80,000 transactions. So many parents came in, touch wood, and not a single incident. Next slide, please. So you're seeing the same thing in senior secondary schools. That's a midday meal grain distribution. You're seeing grain packets as well. I'll end the presentation over here. Just a few points on what I see happening in future. You know, two big things have happened. One, teachers, students, parents, even in the villages, have now seen the power of technology. You know, technology has been talked about over a decade now, but we all know that its implementation took its time. Today, somewhere, how mobile phone, a smartphone acted as a bridge has made everybody realize that technology can play a big role. So my one sense is that now, as we move towards normal, technology adaptation would be at a much faster pace. Everybody has experimented so much. In our own schooling system, I'm seeing teachers doing such amazing work that you would have a lot of innovation on how technology will be used. Second big thing which has happened is the definition of school has changed. Earlier on, school was this building. Today, home is a school. You know, and we know that many good NGOs and many progressive educational institutions, even many progressive principals in government schools, were using community and environment as teaching aids, right? They would send a child for projects to interact with people in community. Today, the boundary of school has become porous. You know, community spaces and home spaces have moved in. And this, with the enhanced role of parents now in education, will continue to empower, you know, how we deliver education on ground in coming days, you know. And this porous boundary of a school, through osmosis now, also good quality teachers will move in over the bridge of technology. So now if you can't take, let's say, good quality English and math teachers into deep rural areas, you can now take them through city and take those teachers into schools. So if we look at the future, take the learnings of this phase, take the great steps that our teachers have taken, don't let them go away. I think we would be looking at a very different delivery model of education. There has to be only two things we have to be really very alive to and very conscious of. First, we have to get all our children back into schools when this phase is over, especially the girl child. Big focus. We can't have out of school children numbers going up. And the second focus is now the way technology would be adapted. I think the entire teacher trainings programs, the teacher education program will have to incorporate technology in a big way. So these are two things that I believe we must focus on. Thank you, Sandeep.
Thank you, Mamta. I think that was wonderful. I mean, you know, it was I must say, inspiring to listen and hear what you said in terms of the experiences that you had over the last 10 months and how, you know, Bharati Foundation could overcome to the large extent the challenges that were brought along with this COVID. What I understand, which worked to your advantage, was already 2 years back you had started this whole aspect of digitizing many of these things. So YouTube, you said, smartphone, using of smartphones. So one thing that comes out very clearly while you speak is, and as you said also in your way forward, that how technology is going to be so important in the future. Digital connectivity is something that we've been talking about all these years, but this pandemic has proved it, quite glaringly, that how important it is, the technology aspect. On a couple of questions to you, Mamta, I understand Bharti Foundation could do what you did because of the kind of infrastructure you had, the use of technology, which you had already started doing it even before the pandemic struck. What about government schools, for that matter? Especially particularly in the far-flung areas. While I started my career with one NGO which used to work in education in Rajasthan, and we used to work in very far-flung areas, very difficult terrain where even government schools were not there, and I had seen the challenges there. Forget technology, even schools were not there, and it was really difficult time because we were also working with government schools in terms of improving their quality of education. How do you see, what is your experience in terms of what did government schools do in this situation?
So first I must correct, while Bharti Foundation, Satya Bharti schools, it's not as if we had technology embedded every single day, and we were fortunate. Innovation is in our DNA. So somebody thought of phone PTMs, right? So that was a device which was available with parents. And like I said, I'm very happy to talk about government teachers. Even in government schools, especially the 800 schools where we were, I know that, I think within 15, 20 days, the teachers started forming WhatsApp groups. Their method may be different, correct? But that process had started. We have reports of within 2 months, 35 to 40% of the students, especially of higher classes, were connected with teachers. The government of India had also started, sending a lot of online resources towards government schools. We did help the schools with whom we were working in curate, in sequencing them, helping them use right kind of resource with right, at right time and things like that. So that had started to happen. I must also talk about government teachers moving out in the villages. We worked with government schools in villages itself, not only to distribute grains, but while they will go to give grain, they would also take a short class of the child and come back. They did book distribution. So on effort, I would say they were there, right? So our Vir Bharti Foundation, our numbers may be higher. So I'm saying 80%, they started with 35 to 40%, and I'm not tracking their data the way I track Bharti Foundation's data, right? I wouldn't be tracking their data like that. So I saw equal amount. And you see, even in Bharti Foundation, our schools in Rajasthan, you're very correct. Our Jodhpur schools, WhatsApp penetration, I'm giving you national average, 75%. In Jodhpur, it's the least, right? In places like if we are in Haryana and Punjab, it is very high, correct? So yes, you're right. Regional differences remain, but our teachers, how much efforts they have made is amazing, Sandeep.
Right. I think, your talk also helps in breaking this myth. So there is also a myth going around in terms of understanding that, urban areas were able to adapt to the situation in terms of using technology for education, while rural areas was not. And there was largely a feeling that, they have been left out. But hearing from you, I understand that, if not fully, to a large extent, that has happened. The second thing that I would like to ask you is that, with the shifting nature of education, which is now turning out to be much more online, how do we measure the quality? How do we measure the engagement? Earlier, the measurement of education was based on dropout rate and enrollment rate. Now that it is going to be online, and you said that homes are the new schools now, how do we measure education? Because it's largely online now.
Sandeep, I'm still looking forward to a time when children, and I'm hoping soon children will start coming to schools, even if for one day a week, right? Online education has helped us. So in urban area, they may have been able to do Zoom classes. That is not possible. That has not happened, to such a large extent in rural. So that divide does exist. So I don't think online in schooling space, at least, can completely replace education, because with small children, a lot of engagement has to happen. Uh, the impact of actually on there are a lot of online tools that help you measure the learning levels instantly, correct? So measuring assessment is easier, correct? You may not be able to have children write essays and immediately, but at least Google Forms and all help you do online assessment quickly. That's not my concern. My concern is about school is not about only education. It is about building community. It is about building life skills. It is about learning how to speak in front of crowd. It is about becoming a leader. It is about mental health. It is about feeling happy, right? So I'm looking forward to, I think in coming year, it's going to be hybrid education, 1 day in school, 6 days at home and things like that. But I'm hoping and praying that very soon we'll see children in schools.
Okay, so with that hope, let us move ahead. I think what a fantastic way to begin this webinar. Thank you, Mamta, once again for that inspiring, experience that you have shared with us. And I'm sure it will be a learning for the participants who are hearing us. We are also on Facebook Live, as I said. This program, as I said in the beginning, is jointly being organized by India Donates, which is a crowdfunding and capacity building platform, Birla Institute of Management Technology, and BIMTech. On this note, I would like to bring in Kaustav. Since we are talking about technology, and BYJU'S is one of the pioneer in terms of tech-based education. What did BYJU'S do in the last 10 months? How do you've become extremely relevant now, particularly. I'm not saying that you're not relevant before, but because of this pandemic, relevance has increased manifold, I'm sure. So one is that what did you do in the last 10 months, and how do you see tech-based education reaching out even to the rural areas?
Sure.
Some we heard from Mamta, but I would like to hear from BYJU'S also.
No, absolutely. I think Mamta actually touched upon some amazing points there. Right? I think some of the open questions that came out from the last one is how do we get teacher training done to incorporate the immediate tech pieces, right? And get them on board, right? And I think the other one, which she's very right in, or I think what she basically said was the fact that the child could see this teacher, right, was such a delight moment. So, and that kind of like feeds back into how he or she develops into, a fully grown person, right? I'll touch upon what we looked at BYJU'S, right? Now, naturally, given the fact that all of this is more reactive and more proactive, right? I'll walk you through what our journey was like and how we're seeing, the next few months or years playing out, right? So, being in product, I too have a slide ready. Let me try and share that with you, right? And what I probably, give me a second, it's just loading up here. What I want to run you through is stuff that we've seen, right? And any takeaways from there, right? Open to questions as to how any of these initiatives worked, what the impact was, so on and so forth, right? And what we're looking at going forward, all right? Now, given the fact that the pandemic just broke to all of us and all of us were caught off guard, right? For us, the first thing to do was to see what are the kind of problems that people are facing. The primary one there was obviously the fact that lots of kids now no longer went to school, so they lacked access to education. So one of the pertinent problems that Mamta also touched upon was the fact that they don't have textbook access for the next year. Also true for most of our students, but our students in general tend to be tier 1, tier 2 metro. So that wasn't necessarily a problem, but the fact is that you're not going into school. There are no examinations at the end of that semester. Kids did not have touch points back with their teachers, right? Which meant that there would naturally be a slowdown of their learning, right? And to that effect, there were two initiatives that we did straight off the bat, right? One was on the BYJU'S app itself. The first thing we did was make it completely free, right? And just put this out there, right? As soon as the lockdown was announced, we opened the app up complete access, right? Anybody could download it and consume all the content. So we had everything from the first grade till the 12th grade up and open for absolutely everybody, right? And this meant that they could continue learning maths and science full-fledged. All right. Naturally, on the numbers side, this did really well because we suddenly saw a huge surge in the number of downloads. But what is also important was that kids were proactively engaging with all forms of content. So it wasn't just let's go download the app, but they used it as a form of primary education for them as well, right? So Journeys is our handheld terminology of how to teach, right? It's based on the mastery concept. So we saw them engaging with Journeys. We saw them taking on the library pieces. We saw them taking on practice and test on the app. And this was very encouraging. We kept this up and live till I think till the end of October, right? When schools started to again, take some form or start to go online in a better manner, right? That was the first one. And the second thing we did was, given the fact that you didn't have scheduled engagement, right? For a lot of parents, school also is a place where, kids are going for during a particular set of time and they're engaged during that time, right? In a proactive medium. Now, a lot of the kids were sitting at home, and not necessarily knowing what to do. And this weighed down on parents who were also, similarly, detained at home, right? So the second piece that we put out immediately was this concept of the free school, where we basically ran scheduled classes every day. And this was from the 4th to the 12th grade again, maths and science being the primary, and it was completely free for all. So you could just go by the app, as you can see on the right, you could just book a class, right? And then when that class came about, we informed the user, and then the child basically came on and learned at that particular time, right? Now, in terms of impact, we ran 8 batches of this, right? And a batch is every 3 weeks. We basically brought on new kids to start from the beginning. And to give you a sense about how well this did, it wasn't just people who were just going there and booking and then not showing up. People who showed up for the first class, 90% of them could show up for the second class. Retention all the way up to 13, 14, 15 classes was a staggeringly high number, which meant that for both the parent and the student, this was a substantial investment in their learning experience, right? So we knew that parents were scheduling this for their kids to say that, okay, you're in 4th grade, this date, between this particular time, I'm going to give you the device, and then you can sit and learn, right? And this along with the previous program meant that you had the scheduled engagement and also the asynchronous component where kids would come on and learn more, right? Or practice more or test more. And both of these initiatives we ran, this one we ran till the end of September. Both of them were very useful for the children, right? And we felt that there was some very positive impact that we generated, right? Now, as far as the next initiative that Byju's is taking on, right? And this comes across as a 4 to 5 year plan that we have, is how do we get education to the underserved community, right? And if you notice both of the prior examples, they need to have a device, they need you to have internet connectivity, right? And I believe from the previous conversation, up to about 30% of these kids did not have access to WhatsApp, right? Which is why you need more door-to-door pieces, right? Byju's has an offline variant, and we've been doing this for multiple years, right? Now the idea for us is how do we get this in the hands of the children? And to this effect, I mean, there are a couple of pieces that we're doing right now. We have working partnerships with all of these foundations, plus we're getting corporates to fund these programs. And one of the more critical, open to all pieces that we've put out is something called the Byju's Give initiative. And it relies on the fact that a lot of us sitting in say metros or tier 1 have a secondary device that we don't necessarily use. Like this is a smartphone that we probably use to, trade off to buy a better smartphone. It's in decent condition or semi-decent condition. And what we've done through the Byju's Give initiative is allow everybody to just say that, okay, this is I have a device. This is the specs. You will come and pick it up, right? And then we refurbish that same device, put on the Byju's content so that it's completely offline, right? And then through our foundations, then send this down to the kids on the ground, right? And that initiative in itself is obviously in its nascency. We've just launched that, I think, 8th of November of last year. It's still ramping up, but we're seeing some very early signs that say that this is fairly positive. And what that will do is get very good quality content and pedagogy through the app in the hands of people who need it the most, right? So I think that was one of the pieces that Mamta also spoke about, which is how do we get take the best quality education and make it seep into the rural areas, right? And our thesis there is that can we take people who have access to these devices? Can we get it to? Can we have them give it to us? We'll put on the right educational tools for the user, and then pass it on to the right child. Right. So the Byju's Give initiative and the Education for All is something that we are all putting a lot of our time and effort into, right? Trying to figure out what that piece is. But if I can step back from the Byju's initiative for a quick second, and I'll just tell you a little bit about how we see the role of EdTech, right, going forward, right? And this is how I summarize it, right? You've got the two primary stakeholders. There are, secondary stakeholders and tertiary stakeholders, being parents, principals, people along that whole chain, right? But for students, we have, like three simple problems to solve, right? One is access to content, right? The second is, again, what I think you touched upon in a question, right? Which is how do you track students' growth, right? Or how do you get the assessments in place, right? And the third thing, which the pandemic has sadly done, is there's a well-known notion of a summer slump, which is when your class ends in one grade, and then you go into the summer, and then you start off again, and you see a degradation of the child because he's not necessarily practiced, right? He or she's gone out and played, had a good time, and then now coming back to class and needs to revamp that piece, right? Now, all three of these, the access of content, of course, is something that we believe very highly at Byju's, right? To get you good quality content, sitting wherever you are, right? Everybody has that right. The second and the third piece is where product initiatives come in, right? Where we work with a lot of feature set building or product building, and assessments done correctly and done contextually to the child, right? Will help us in understanding what is the right piece of content that needs to go out to the user, right? So think of it as a simple diagnostic, right? And being able to say that, okay, these are the problem areas or areas of improvement for each of these children, right? And that's where the third piece will come in, right? Whereas arresting this slump, right? A lot of kids don't necessarily need to be taught from scratch, right? They have residual knowledge that can be leveraged off of, right? For us now, the idea is how do I pinpoint that? Okay, these are the prerequisites that he or she is weak at, right? And what is the best format of content that I can get to this child, right? And what's the fastest way to do that? So I think these are the core, problems that that the ed tech part of it can solve, right? Taking nothing away from the fact that we still have to ensure that they get this digital medium, or they're onboarded with the digital medium. But kids in general are like way smarter than us. So that's more of an access problem that we need to solve, right? But if you look at the teachers, and I believe that even Mamta spoke about this, right? A lot of the teachers' initial problems were, how do I go online? or how do I take this online, right? We have been speaking to teachers across the country for about the last 3 to 6 months, right? And the core problem for them is being able to hold a class. Of course, I'm talking from a different space where online classes are a thing, right? And being able to hold a class. And the second part is, how do I get content that I can, easily disseminate to the child while taking this class online, right? And those are the two, main pain points that we are seeing right now. Of course, I'm sure that tons more, right? Taking nothing away from that at all. But these are going to be critical levers to work with, right? That is within our realm of work, right? And to be able to say that, okay, now you've got a teacher, she's got a class 10 to 30. How does she conduct that class? How does she, assess those children so that each one gets their due, right? How do we ensure that the life piece is working, but the children themselves can invoke, say, an asynchronous piece, right? To say that, okay, I believe this was taught in class, but I seem to see that you have a problem with this particular prerequisite. Do you want to go and learn that prerequisite, right? So those are the kind of interesting pieces that we are working on right now, right? Content and formats, obviously, Byju's excels at, right? Where product innovation is going to come in is finding these pain points, right, and trying to address them en masse, right? And what I would say is that no one solution is perfect, right? We're trying to do the best we can so that we can address a larger base, right? What we learned right now was, I love that example of how teachers were just doing a video call with three kids, because that's a limit on the video call, giving an assignment and then following it up on a call, right? That works as well, right? But how do we ensure that this becomes something scalable that any and all teachers do, and take away the tech problems that that are festering with children or with teachers, right? So that teachers can focus more on the education, right? And that's where the outcomes can come out. Right, I think I've shot my time, so I'll stop sharing.
Unless if you have any closing points to make.
No, that's about it, right? So for us, I can tell you a little bit about what our methodology is here, right? We basically work very closely with foundations, with organizations, with children. Since pandemic, that's obviously been a little tougher. But just short of this, I believe it was in February where we were in schools trying to understand, how, I believe one of the points was about pronunciation, right? And how do we improve pronunciation? So for us, it is to work with foundations and organizations to try and understand what those critical pain points are, and then try and find scalable solutions to them, through product or technology, right? The teacher, taking the teacher out of the equation is not the question at all, right? That simple thing that said that students face delight when they see the teacher, right? It's such a critical part of their lives, and they've been growing up with that, right? For tech or edtech to succeed, it's about how do we further those relationships, or how do we further the learning, right? And how do we make it so that it's scalable and a teacher doesn't have to worry about, but how do I share? Ye share kaise hota, right? Ki your PPT kaise banegi? Where will I get the content from? All of those are problems that we should put in the past, right? We should enable the teachers to do the best they can, and the kids have access to the right tools and the content so that their educational journey is amplified.
Thank you, Kaustav, for sharing those perspectives. Very interesting. So the world is talking about technology-driven education, and as you said, Byju's has been one of the pioneering organizations. You already shared some of the interesting initiatives that you've had, particularly this Byju's Give program, Give initiative that you started, Education for All. That was really great to know that you immediately you made it free for people to download. Which brings me to the question that I think, as per the data, there has been a 200% increase in number of new students using your product. Mm-hmm. Who are these students? I mean, I'm not asking particularly who, but in terms of where are these students from? So these are new students.
Mm-hmm.
There has been a 200%. Are they largely urban?
No, so I think that's a misconception that we're necessarily a metro player, right? We are in tier one, we are in tier two, right? A large number of our proactive users are coming from non-metro this thing cities, right? So what we have seen right now is that it's a smattering of people because it's not. So I'll tell you why we don't think that it's necessarily just metro as well, right? It's because we have a language option, right? And every video that is out there, right, is in about I believe 8 languages now, right? And we are seeing proactive usage of this in non-English languages, right? So these are students sitting in far-flung areas of India who are also just coming on and enjoying it, right? So I would say that it's a new world because I think the pertinent problem that was asked or spoken about the last time is how do you take the best quality education and get it into the tier 2 or the tier 3, and I think we're already there.
Right. One thing that I particularly liked about what you said is that you do not in any ways take away the role of a teacher. In fact, you give a lot of emphasis on the role of a teacher.
Sure.
So how do you think what could be done or what would be the way forward in terms of training of these teachers if we have to reach that scale?
Sure.
How will that scalability come? Do you think the government is going to take up the edutech based programs in future and therefore the scale will come? Or how will the scale generate?
Sure. I think one of the important things is, when it comes to the tech part of it, I think all the teachers have been forced to, administer tech or take on tech, right? Now it's about, how do you ensure that there's quality outcomes, right? That's going to be fairly critical. So you've got the teachers, in their own space, they've been doing a great job, right? Now, how do we ensure that they can get access to even better content to amplify their teaching, for instance, right? How do you ensure that they're benchmarking themselves, right? How do you ensure that all of this data is actionable and is positive? So one of the pieces that that we were talking about is we were speaking to principals about what tools we can enable them with, and one of the questions that the teachers ask us is, will you be tracking all the times that I'll be taking classes, right? And to me it's a no-brainer because I love tracking data, right? I love looking at what that impact looks like. But this teacher's problem was the fact that she was not necessarily very well versed with taking on classes, which meant that she struggled in her classes. Right. So now if I slap an NPS score at the end of that class, in the first few cases it might be counterproductive. Right. It might just spiral and this person might no longer want to teach. Right. So it's about implementing the right tools so that there's a positive outcome. Right, we don't need to have oversight in all cases, right? And even if you have oversight, other people who have oversight, going to approach this problem positively, right? So just because you have a measuring stick doesn't mean you measure absolutely everything, because in education, not all the outcomes are entirely objective, right? Some of them are subjective, they're contextual. So just being able to, give you a good tool or a fancy tool with, all the bells and whistles doesn't solve everybody's problems, right? So it's about working with those teachers correctly. On the skilling part, I believe we're already working with NSDC to help them scale their skilling programs, right? From us, the way I would look at this objectively is, how do we get them access first? Right, and then help them, upskill themselves, as opposed to me forcibly going and upskilling a teacher or saying, okay, but you're not up to par, right? Because I might not be right. Right? There's a good chance that I won't be right. Right? I come from a different world. Right? For me, the numbers make sense or don't make sense. Right? Which is where the user research and the user experience part of it plays on both the child and the teacher front. Right? How do I ensure that both of them are getting a good experience in a nutshell?
Right, right. Thank you very much for that.
Sure.
Last question, probably maybe we will pick up the questions from the participants. I already see some questions that have come up, but I would request again the participants to please post their queries in the chat box so that we are able to take it up later on. The last question to you, Kaustubh, before I go to the next panelist is, as Mamta said, education, school is not only about education, it is much more than that. And edutech company or edutech based education that you impart somehow I believe does not cater to that part of a child's development. How do you see, is there any possibility or on that front?
No, so that's an interesting problem, and I think these are still open questions for us as well, right? Why I started off this whole thing saying we've all caught off guard, right? Is primarily we were a secondary or an alternative, learning platform, right? We aren't your primary learning platform, right? But what we suddenly saw was with the scheduled engagement, with classes being online classes being a thing, right? A lot of this was breaking down, right? Kids were spending as much time with us as like they were spending outside of us in learning, right? Because for multiple reasons, I guess. One of them was like schools themselves weren't, putting out as many classes, right? But the number, which is about 70 plus minutes or something a day, right? That's a startling number, right, for any child, right? Now, what we needed to do was be able to break this down so that the child takes something positive out of it, right? Sorry, Sandeep, could you just go back to that earlier question? I got a little distracted by the chat there.
So no, I was asking that, because education, school does not only provide education, it is much more than that.
Right. So now that we've addressed, the core problems on the delivery, right? Now we're trying to expand the scope of the problem, right? The simple answer, and it gets tossed around a lot, is how does tech solve for the social angle of learning, right? And there are multiple ways that you could say that. You'd be like, okay, I'll start a chat group, right? Or I'll start a study group, or I'll start a discussion forum. Not all of them necessarily encapsulate the simplicity of being able to nudge somebody who's sitting next to you and asking him what the answer is, right? The way that we look at it is, can we be objective about what we're actually driving, and that's the education, right? And then see where in the ladder each of these pieces come about, right? So I still feel from an edtech perspective, we are solving some of the top-heavy problems still, right? The social piece can come about later, right? But would I want them to just come out there and have, a chit-chat room, right? Which happens in school, right? Like taking nothing away from that, right? Some of the best conversations you have is just with a friend and you're just talking nonsense, and it makes no academic outcome, right? But for us at this point in time, I would say that lies outside of the immediate sphere of objective education dissemination, right? But it can eventually come about, right? So you're seeing like a lot of interesting new tools out there, right? That kids are engaging with, for their social pieces, right, or their social needs, right? Even in lockdown, right? Do we need all of them? Are they the best thing for us? I would say we haven't come to an answer yet, right? So we will continue to do experiments, but our core focus is to ensure that we're delivering on education and educational outcomes first, and everything else like that dovetails into it is good, right?
Thank you very much. I think fantastic. So so to understand the perspective from an edutech company, how do they see it? And it's very interesting what you said. And I'm sure there are a couple of questions that has come up, which we will take it up later. But now I would like to move to the third speaker. So far we've heard about education from a let me put it this way for the sake of understanding, a traditional organization providing education, even though they have adopted technology and used it for imparting education even during this COVID times. Then we heard from a edutech company as to what they did and what kind of future they foresee in terms of education in India. How about the global? So what did other countries do? So what is the global perspective in terms of how education was dealt with during these challenging times? And to do that, I would now like to invite Dr. Aishwarya Mahajan, who is the director at Livelihood and Education at Action International, which is a international organization, works in different parts of the world. And I think it would be very interesting to hear from him some of the experiences that he has to share about the globally how education was imparted during this time. So over to you, Dr. Mahajan.
Thank you, Sandeep. Thank you very much. So I'll just take forward from where Mamta has left, and you raised the question to Kaustubh, where the question, the definition of education. So education, how we see, and I must proudly say that Aided Action was the organization. Actually, we started this debate way back in 1999 when we started the denial of education, actually, where we said that education can't be done only in four walls. So you have to, take children out from these four walls for the education. And the whole concept of liberate school was developed at that point of time when we said that learnings needs to be done by peer learning, learning needs to be done by the, the environment, learning needs to be done by by doing. So that's how the concept of Liberate School was started, and Aided Action was the organization which actually, have taken this forward. So as far as I was listening to, Kaustubh and Mamta on the digital thing. And if you look at, these strategies which has been adopted during the pandemic and post-pandemic now, if I say, the most impacted, because the data says 1.6 billion children have been actually impacted. And only alone, if we talk about India, 32 crore of children has been affected by these kind of interventions, maybe by the end of it. And if you just see the 30 out of this 32 crore, 14 crore are at the primary level, and 13 crore are at the secondary level. So that's the highest level number which have been impacted. And when we are talking about technology, so that also now that has given us to assess where we are, because now it's not about people have come up with a term of learning poverty. So we have always talked about economic poverty, but this is again a new term which is coming where we are talking about how learning poverty has increased. Okay, it's good when we talk about digital divide and digital this thing, availability of digital this thing. But if you ask me, if I talk, say, the sub-Saharan Africa's availability, so 89% of students don't have access to computer. And if you go further, these children, those who have that the 87% don't have access to internet. And if you go further, the mobile network providers, we also need to see that around more than 50%, around 56% people don't have the places, you don't have mobile networks, which we will, provide these kind of intervention. So if you talk to me, something happening in Burkina Faso or Guinea in Africa, yes, we tried with this digital thing, but digital is not the solution at that point of time. Or if you ask me, the interventions in Jagdalpur, Sukma or Dantewada in Chhattisgarh, so it's common when you go and try to see that. So definitely digital was the solution. So that's where, if you look into the interventions by the government and the civil society organizations, they have got into the broadcast mode. This broadcast mode was through radio, through television, or through different channels. And radio was the most powerful tool during this period, which has been done. So if you talk to me, we have tried this in Cambodia, we have tried this in Assam in India, we have tried this in few of the countries in Africa. So that's why when we talk about the broadcast mode, that has been taken in place, and that has helped And I see a positive change in teachers during this period where they have worked very hard. And I think Mamta and Kaustubh both has mentioned this, where they have said that teachers themselves have come forward. They have designed, the methodologies, how they will train these teachers, just for the sake that they want to reach out to the students. And I think that has helped in the, improvement of the creativity of teachers, where they have done a lot of work. Since Aided Action is already working in more than 20 countries, whether it is, Africa, Togo, Benin. So Benin, if I give you example of Benin, there the parents' capacity building was the most important thing, where we work with parents to make sure that the learning outcomes of children should be encouraged with the help of teachers. And there the volunteer teachers, those who were moving from one place to another place, actually has helped us to improve or to maintain the continuous learning of these children during that particular period. If I may share the example of Cambodia, we use the mobile libraries, where the tuk-tuks, normally known as in the Southeast Asia, we use that model where the teachers were moving in the villages, village to village, where they were trying to take the classroom nearer to these children to ensure the continuity of their learning. In the technological also, we also tried to work with the digital this thing. But the challenge is, the countries like India, you have so many languages. It's not only about Hindi or English. Then you have so many state government curriculums and all. But if you go further, you have Bhili, you have Gondi, you have some other tribal languages, which is again how you are going to work with that. That again also become a challenge for us, how you are going to do that. And that's again the challenge I had from for all of us, when we say, okay, we really want to get into these kind of work. But I think this pandemic has given us to think that if this kind of situation is there, and if we really want to work for the children and their continuity of education in certain situations, how we are going to do that. And I think that's where the edtech companies like Byju's need to step in and see, and the civil society organizations like us, where we are working with. So I can tell you, the teacher resource group, which has been created by Aided Action in India, we are actually working with these teachers resource groups, where these teachers are helping us with the content development, how this can be done. So edtech companies needs to join hands with the civil society organizations and with these teachers to ensure that they should get the right kind of curriculum. And can we use this technology which can use to the end user or end line person, which is actually denied with all the opportunities. And that's where we talk about the issue of inclusion. Because when we are talking about digital, then again, data already says that hardly 50%. If I go developing countries, if you go developed countries, if you go low income and middle income countries, and if you go the lower income countries, there is a total differentiation about these available resources. So that has become a challenge. In one of the other examples, maybe Kaustubh would be interested to know that what we have done in Cambodia, we have actually used the Khmer Library application, which is available on the Play Store. We actually converted these books in the local languages there, and that has been very popular now, and it has been used by these people, in this thing. So these kind of interventions where we have, worked on that. Yes, another thing which I find which has helped the trainers to enhance their capacities by using the various applications like Zoom, where to talk about various and other methodologies, and that has actually helped these various teachers who have already done that. So if we look at the overall aspects, if may I say, so there are various methods which has been adopted not only by the various countries, their governments, but also by the civil society organization. Because the population with whom we are working, they might not have the access to the resources which we are talking about, with where my earlier panelist also said that there is a need to have the equipment. So if they don't have equipment, if they have equipment, whether they have the connectivity, whether they have all those access to them, that again is the another challenge or issue which has been done. So as an organization, we have done these interventions. Definitely the mobile application, where we have also helped one of the application partners, where we help them to design or develop the content, not only for various boards. And now we are also looking forward and would be happy to join hands if we can get the opportunity to reach out in the different languages, where that's the biggest challenge, especially in terms of countries like India, where this local language learning or mother language learning is very important. And I think we need to raise this always challenges. And yes, and the last thing is, again, it's not about secondary. Vocational education is also something, skill training. A loss of jobs is which has already happened. So we have also tried the similar mode to get into developing these contents, get into the larger side of the preparation of training curriculums which can be utilized and used. And if you look at the government initiatives also, whether it is e-Pathshala, whether it is Swayam or other initiatives, government has also done a lot of work on all these things. So I think as an international development organization, if I may say this thing, different interventions in different countries, especially in the I must say the West African countries, the Southeast Asian countries, even in South Asia, if you look at a lot of different models has been evolved apart from the digital this thing, where the local resources have come forward, local models of interventions have come forward, as I shared with you. That I think we also need to sit together, and we need to take an initiative where we need to bring those learnings at one platform, which can help all of us coming together. And I must congratulate you, Sandeep, for bringing different stakeholders at one platform, talking about this initiative. I think the collective efforts, we can bring the new evolution or the new models which can help to improve the quality of education of children. So I think that's all. I hope I'm in time also, Sandeep.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Very interesting, and particularly to throw up the challenge in terms of, showing some kind of reality. So it was, your talk was some kind of a reality check also, where you focused on one aspect, which is accessibility. So when we talk about tech-based education, you need internet, you need smartphones, you need laptops. And you said, the data that you said in the sub-Saharan countries, or even in India, the rural parts of India where technology has not reached, where there is even no digital connectivity, how do we then say that tech-based education is going to be the future? What could be the alternative? I think that was something which was very interesting. One thing that you talked about, and which I would also like to ask you, is that you said globally over 1.2 billion children are out of classroom in almost 186 countries. That is what the data suggests. The focus of during all these has been on students. But one of the fundamental aspects that has not been looked at much is about teachers. How do we, you said about teachers resource program, teachers resource group that EdTechSM runs. Are there other models? What should be done? What is being done in India? Let us focus in India now. Are there other kind of initiatives that are taking place to build capacities of teachers? Kostav also talked about this point, why he spoke the importance of a teacher. But in all these discussions, deliberations that we've been having since last 10 months or so, somewhere, the focus has not been on teachers so much as it is necessary. What is your take on that?
See, if you say the global data also now on, if I may say, one teacher is trained for 56 people. That's the 56 children. And that is only on the digital thing. This is what I'm saying. That's the global data. If you go, so it may be less at the developing countries and it may be higher on the lower middle and income group companies. So that's where we need to say, and it is very important that we need to work, especially for building capacities of children. So if you look at, the interventions which has been done, and since we have been working with Microsoft and other, partner organizations, they have tried to do that, where they have actually helped all our, teachers and trainers to get trained on this digital training thing. But it is not only about digital training. As I said, when there are other things, when we talk about the child-centered learning, it is very important to get into these kind of capacity building training programs. So you have worked with the organizations where we have worked a lot to build the capacities of teachers, because they are the end connect with the children and all. So definitely, if you look at these, especially in India, the budget on teacher training, which is getting reduced every year now. So that is something, a concern, where we need to say, you have the agencies of DIDE and all, which they are taking care, but there also the teacher training curriculums have not been revised so long. So we need to talk about all these issues now post-pandemic, where we have learned a lot of issues and challenges, and we have seen the kind of capacities now are required for these teachers. So how we can do that? So we need to bring, and I know there are a couple of models where the organizations, those who are expert in working with the teachers, have been asked by the state governments to come on board for the teachers training and capacity building. But I think the resources are already available, and that's where I mentioned the teachers resource group. So you have teachers awarded by government, recognized by their work, hard work which they have done. And if they can come on board, if they can be identified, if they can be given the responsibilities, they are the best resources, I feel, to cater this challenge of teachers training, because they know ins and outs of the particular issue, and they can be very helpful.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that is very wonderfully said. Perhaps one thing which you also talked about would be interesting to do is to capture these different models which has been practiced in different parts of the world during this pandemic time, and something to learn from. It would be good, or it would be great if you could collaborate in some ways to do that kind of a study, and which could be used for future. Well, that brings me to the teacher in the group, Professor Rahul Singh, our last panelist for the day, but who is going to speak about new education policy. While we are talking about education, we cannot, particularly in the post-COVID era, we cannot talk without talking about the new education policy and the panoramic implication it is likely to have. In itself, it is a comprehensive policy. It seeks to make education more accessible, equitable, and inclusive. With this new education policy, how do you foresee the landscape of education in India? Is the policy adapt enough to tackle the challenges that has been posed due to the pandemic? Is it sufficient, or what is lacking in that? Professor Rahul Singh.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sandeep. Pleasure meeting you after a long time, meeting you after a long time, and also connecting with the speakers who are there. I think this has been fantastic by now, and being the last speaker, I have more reference points. Yeah, so I can always refer 3 more speakers, and they're good points. So that's an advantage with me. As you guided me, I'm going to focus more on the structure of the new education policy and some of the inputs from some of those experts whom I interacted. So the content is already there in the new education policy, but maybe I would reflect on some of the personal interactions I've had in the last 2 committees with 1 or 2 members which I interacted, and maybe that will create the background. And that will also probably be verifying what some of the speakers, almost everyone, is trying to reflect on. So let me put 2-3 things. One, I was talking to Mr. Subramaniam, who was the chairman of the first draft committee report. And we spent about an hour together after the report was done and was submitted. It was taking long time to come in the public for remarks and opinion, right? I wanted to capture as a professor in that those things are not in public, but now they're in public. So I wanted to learn his mind, how he has planned on the committee drafting and what was the basic agenda. Fixing the basic agenda was very difficult, but the committee members agreed at least on one thing, that instead of making it at macro level, we wanted to make it at micro level. The cultural, regional habits are important. They will not go away. Connecting students with their mother tongue is very important. Connecting them with the teachers in the regional, at the regional level is very important. So somehow he wanted to build up the infrastructure from the software point of view and not the hardware point of view. Resources of schools in terms of building and playground, all those things are all right. But then if you don't have a passionate teacher in the language he or she is teaching, education cannot be done, right? So, I like the example which he gave, and that is if, a doctor does a mistake, we lose a body and we are sad for maybe 6 months or an year. But if a teacher does a mistake, for next 40 years, we will produce wrong human capital. So that is the assumption which the committee started building on. The second point, which he later became the member of the committee. I was interacting at the personal level, and the mathematician that we brought in from Canada, Manjul. Manjul is a trained mathematician. He is field medal. That means somebody getting mathematics medal, once in 4 years, under 40 years. So he has that kind of a scholarship accomplishments. And I was asking him, how did you become a mathematician and what kind of training did you have? So he studied in Canada, but he used to come to India to learn Sanskrit and music. So for 9 months, he will study mathematics. For 3 months with his mother, he will come to India and go to different gurus to learn Sanskrit and music. So mathematics, music, and Sanskrit is what he had studied all through. And I asked the reason, and he wanted to build up the diversity in the portfolio of capabilities and capacities that he was building in, right? So I think all the speakers talked about it. Education is not about only technology or only school premise or only a teacher. It is more about life experience, where some of the capabilities will come in. If these were the assumptions, and these were the people who, these quality people were the part of the committee, of course, the thought process was very deep. You remember, I'm connecting it little theoretically just for, creating a reference point. From Dr. Radhakrishnan in 1948 to Kothari Commission, we took a long time in 1986, got modified again in 92. The economy, society has been changing in some way in these durations, but in last 20, 25 years, I think it has stepped up several times. And that's the reason probably we needed an education policy which can appreciate the changes happening in the society and the economy nowadays. So we are moving from, all the serious things that we did in 60s, 70s, and 80s. We got benefit of this. We had some of the brilliant people going around the world, bringing technology back or experiences back, capabilities back, creating great institutions in the country. Their schooling was done in India, right? And their schooling was done in such a manner that they served the governments or private corporations at the top level. And they did not mistake. They did not go to jail, except 1 or 2 instances that we have. I think that is the cultural benefit that we still bring in the education policy. There are 2, 3 things which I would like to highlight when it comes to education policy. I think for the first time, we are connecting education policy with the human capital. This is the biggest change I would like to observe theoretically when we are talking about the new education policy, right? So if you take the latest ranking, I think we did not give much attention to it in past, But from last 2 years, World Bank also is started taking this theory and model into its reporting. So they have appreciated human capital now. Now everyone knows what is the importance of knowledge and people in any society and economy, right? It is made up of people only. India is 115 in the ranking, imagine. We have the best talent of the world. We are most young society. We are not like Japan and Russia, which is 55 years and 50 years. We are 27, 29. But in the ranking of human capital, we are 115. We are not using our brains to produce good for society and economy. So covering up that lag is very difficult, but not impossible, of course. It needs what I think Mamta and Kaustubh and Aishwarya, all three talked about. It needs very, very focused execution. Policies are never wrong. If we are able to implement that policy for the benefit of society and economy in the right manner, I think that is credible. And I see those kind of elements in the present government, okay? What UK government did when Tony Blair was there, execution. What Singapore did, execution. I see Modi doing that, execution. That is important. That's, from that point of view, this policy is going fine. We may not have that kind of philosophical strength, what we had in what Radhakrishnan and Kothari Commission had, but it is very, very functional to delivery. When it comes to the value chain connections, I think connecting on the teacher training, assessment, pedagogy, curricula, those are the areas we have missed a lot of things in last 15 years. We needed to catch up on that, but it's all right. I mean, it happens sometimes in society. We need to look in what can we do in next 5 to 10 years. And I think there is a plan that we will have NEP in full implementation in next 10 years time. So if we are targeting 10 years, it's not wrong. That means very practical. It's not coming from a philosophical background that we have to do it in next 2 years. That is impossible. And lastly, respecting the time, just a very quick reference point again. If we are able to implement it right way, which this policy focuses a lot upon, and also the society and private companies have started addressing to these issues. I think one of the good things that we had done is, something done by you, creating debates in the society. What used to happen in Pune, in Hyderabad, in Bangalore, creating debates in the society, increasing the awareness level, let things flow in the air and people will understand that they need to change. Schools, teachers, students, everyone will start changing, yeah? So I think we have started appreciating that few good schools are not examples for India. We have to increase average. Few IITs and IIMs cannot make India. If average is going up, human capital will be created. Otherwise, we always had good IITs and IIMs, but we are still at 115, right? So I will stop here with the last bullet points that whatever it takes. The policy is fantastic. It is connecting education, skill, employability. Some of those gaps which were not filled earlier are being recovered, are being addressed here. Execution side looks nice. At least the plan side is good. If we are able to somehow deliver it, that would be fantastic. And we have to target to take the average level up. That means going to town B and C and villages and working with kids. They're very, very smart kids. I have my personal experiences traveling to almost 30, 50 schools in different regions in Haryana, UP, Bihar. They are very, very smart. They only don't get the opportunity to show themselves. So I think there is a hope. Yes. Thank you very much. I stop here.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. I think that was very interesting. Of course, the National New Education Policy, once it was announced, it was really welcomed largely by, the country. There is a glimmer of hope, definitely. People see a hope in that. As you said, what is important is execution. One of the critiques always that we had was our education system is much more academic than application-based. And you said that in this new education policy, large part of focus is also on employability, which is basically about application. That is interesting. Because of the time factor that I have in my mind, just one question that I would like to ask you, then I would open up for the question answer round with the rest of the panelists, is in this new education policy, have they factored in the technology part? Personally, I'm very much interested in technology, and I would like to know whether the technology aspect, whether use of technology for imparting education at primary, secondary and higher education level, has that been factored in this new education policy?
That's right. It is very much there. So when I was saying that it is a skill connection based, when we are talking a skill framework, it is connecting employability to it. They cannot do it without tools and techniques. So the labs and tools, techniques, models, frameworks, everything has to be there. One, the promotion of vocational training cannot happen again. So technology is, I'm not talking ITIs in particular, where we are still teaching automobile on ambassador machines. Yeah. I think they realize these kind of field mapping, the gaps which are happening, that let's not teach automobile in ITIs, and wherever practicals are happening, something what happened 20 years back, that's connected with the immediate world. They have commented on technology, infrastructure, technology as infrastructure, just not a facilitator. So it's very much connected. It is connected with the future of work, on technology, on vocational. Since we are discussing only the school education, going in that detail, the higher education is much more than that. But technology is one of the important, if I can say so, functional stakeholder in the whole school education system. Yes.
Right. Thank you very much. I think that was very interesting. We've heard 4 panelists sharing their views and perspective on education. The bottom line is it needs to be inclusive, whether we use technology for doing that, whether there are alternate models by which we could do that, is something that we need to see in future. But there is a lot of hope. There is a lot of excitement, the manner in form in which things are developing in the country and also worldwide. I would now like to pick up some of the questions that have come from the panel, the participants. I hope all panelists are here. First one is a direct question to Mamta, I think. Mamta, are you there? Yeah. So I think this is a direct question to you, which has come. How Bharati Foundation has dealt with the user perspective of technology diffusion in more concrete way, whether teachers were the opinion leaders?
Very interesting question. In our case, actually teachers drove the innovation, so who better than teacher who knows, which all children would have, what kind of phone. Teachers knew how much savvy the parents were, which parents needed more help. I don't think you can drive technology into schools unless teachers are the leaders and drivers of it.
Right. I think that's a very, very, very nicely said in terms of the response. I think this question is for, I think Kaustubh could answer it. What is a process, heterogeneous group of students who have different learning levels, particularly in government schools, since the content and pedagogy mostly are for homogeneous group of students, so how do you ensure that when you are developing such course contents or modules that you develop, how do you ensure the heterogeneity aspect of it?
So I think that was a pertinent question. Actually, the next part of that question is also relevant. A class 6 or 8 student may not have learning levels.
Right.
Class 3 of this thing. The way that we look at this is, irrespective of where the curriculum is taught, right? There is a base knowledge graph that exists, specifically with the K-12 curriculum, right? You are going to learn vectors, you are going to learn linear algebra, right? So we have an exhaustive knowledge graph that pans across it, and that knowledge graph could have different, let's say, streams, right? To say that, okay, this is what is delved into deeper in CBSE. This is a different flavor of the same concept or the subtopic for ICSE, right? And depending on where that user is or who what he or she is opting into, right? We deliver that content. But the other deeper question is how do we know where that person lies on that knowledge graph, right? I think that's the more pertinent second point that Karthik was trying to make, right? And a lot of that comes down to diagnostics, right? About being able to say, okay, let me ask this person a particular question, right? And then see what he or she is getting right or wrong, right? And then do I delve deeper into that and say, okay, if you got this right or you've got this wrong, more importantly, then what other pieces could have led to this answer being wrong, right? And then you delve deeper into that, and then you finally fixate or gravitate around what that user's actual levels are, right? So it's about, one is obviously having that depth, right, and mapping / the content readiness, and the second part is being able to assess that child correctly.
Right. One question maybe, I suppose it is to you directly, is how do you see the response of online classes for children with intellectual disabilities in rural areas? Do you have some data around this aspect?
Is it to me? Because I don't.
I don't know. Since you talked about online classes, therefore I was referring to you, but any other panelists could also respond to it. So,
right.
How do you see the response of online classes for children with intellectual disabilities in rural areas?
I'm afraid I don't have a data point.
The question could probably be enlarged and thought about from a sense that does the course curriculum that you develop, the course content that you develop, or the interface that is there, does it take into account people with disabilities in terms of they being able to use it and understand it? Do you factor in that part while doing the development?
I mean, if you press me for an answer, we've been looking at this, right? It's definitely, we had a whole deck on how to go about this piece. But as of now, we don't have the tools to it. We don't have something granular to say that, okay, this is specific to this particular problem set, right? And I understand that it's a pertinent problem, right? But I don't have an answer to it at this point in time.
Yes, just to add to
yes,
very
please.
quickly, Sandeep, what Costa was saying. I think from the pedagogic point of view, we may not have data, but I have visited schools which are 1 to 5 and 6 to 10, 12. 1 to 5 have very different level of challenges. EdTech companies or even the schools could not find a way out to meet, satisfaction level or deliver the content to those who are intellectually challenged. So every solution is not possible. Right. I think we have to live with the fact that, when there is a crisis, there are problems, challenges, solutions that can come out, whatever innovation capabilities will have certain limited abilities. So the school replacement in form of online or gadget format, that is not possible.
Right. I think that's coming out very clearly during the deliberations that we've had. This one, it says that MLE is in 22 languages. What about others? Tribal means approved Santhali one. What about others? Anyone? Would you like to take up this question? Basically, I think it means that, it just caters to 22 languages, but what about others? If we are thinking about this tech-based education or, online-based education, then what Aishwarya was also mentioning, that how about, the different tribal dialects, which is important to impart education. How can we do that? So I think the question is more to that end.
I think we have to work on that, and very simple direction is that let's give time and attention to work in the domain where we have not given attention by now. And Aishwarya is very clear, we have to build it on. We haven't solved all the problems.
Okay, so I think we are, coming to the end of this webinar. We are already, exceeded by 10 minutes. But before I close, any last words from the panelist? Dr. Singh, any last word from your side? The future of education in India.
I have from my side is thank you very much for organizing this. This was fantastic, to have a diversity in a panel like this, practitioners and the technology infrastructure and an academic So thank you very much. This was really a pleasure meeting everyone, and especially picking your brain. You are very structured in the delivery.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Dr. Mahajan?
No, nothing, Sandeep. It's pleasure again, listening to all of these people, Kaustubh, Dr. Singh, Mamta, and, bringing academics, practitioners, tech institution, corporate foundation at one place. I know it's never an easy task, but you have done it, wonderfully. And I think this should be a beginning. And let's keep this momentum together, and let's find some more time to sit and discuss on these issues. And definitely when we talk about special education, it is again one of the areas, because the points which has been asked by the, all our, viewers, I think these are very relevant questions, and we need to work on that. So thanks once again, and it was really pleasure listening to all the esteemed panelists. Thank you very much, Sandeep.
Thank you. Kaustubh, last word.
Right. Yeah, I'd say that being in the edtech space, one of the things we don't do as much is learning. So it's been a learning experience being here. Right. Thanks for all the great insights. So I'll take away quite a lot from this panel. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. Mamta, last word, and I would also, like you to thank the panelists on behalf of the organizers. Bharti Foundation is one of the organizers of this event. I would also like you to thank the participants and vote of thanks to the panelists. Mamta, over to you.
Thank you, Sandeep. First, I must say, and many speakers have echoed that, such a diverse group. I mean, it's very rarely that I have enjoyed a discussion as much as I did today. The quality of inputs that came in were amazing. So a lot of credit to your team, Sandeep, to put this panel in place. And I think many of the speakers have said that it was very interesting to listen to each one of them, and learn. So on behalf of India Donates and Bharti Foundation, thank you so much for taking out your time today afternoon, and a very happy Independence Day to all of you. Republic Day.
Republic Day. Thank you very much once again from our side as well. The host organization, BIMTech, India Donates and Bharti Foundation. We will keep connecting. That's what I think is important. And I hope there will be opportunities for us to connect again. Thank you very much to all the panelists and the participants. Good evening.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.